what I want to talk about here is there's a missing piece of testing in ZFS. I think nobody's been able to tell me that there isn't. So, and basically it's that ZFS has this backwards compatibility like sort of promise that given the new version of the ZFS software, it's going to be able to use any old pool version and access it and write to it without making any changes that make it incompatible with the old version of the software unless you explicitly upgrade the pool. And this basically isn't tested because it's very hard, because the real way to test that is to take the old version of the software, make the pool, export it, import it into a different kernel with the new version of the software, run a bunch of changes, export it and import it back in, and then see that it still works. And then doing this for every version you want to test backwards compatibility with. So what I've been told by people who test ZFS is that generally what you do to test the old versions is just with the new version, what the newest version of the software is, just zpool create, set the version, test that you can upgrade it and whatever, but you never involve the older version of the software even to create the pool generally. So, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a little bit is feature flags, which is kind of when we're trying to make it easier for people in different organizations to work on features in ZFS separately that include on-disk format changes, and it's going to get tricky to kind of test this compatibility requirement. So, yes. Oh, and then the other kind of requirement that segues nicely from the previous conversation is it'd be really nice if developers could test this easily, especially like new developers like me who screwed it up, which is why I did this. All right. So what is ztest? And distinguishing it from what John was talking about, the ZFS test suite, ztest is just a binary that's already in the illumos gate that's existed since the beginning of ZFS, as far as I know. What it does is all of the ZFS kernel module code is compiled into a userland library through Blackmagic, and then linked to by this command line program called ztest, and it runs, calling directly into these kernel functions, running all sorts of things, and in parallel, and making sure that everything that's supposed to, be safe to run is actually safe. So, just kind of as an example of how easy this is to run, I just ran a little test. It's ztest. It prints out a couple things, everything worked, and everyone's happy. So, the overview of what we want to happen here, and basically all I've done is add a new command line option. I just want to kind of get the word out there that it exists, because there's a whole lot of command line options in ztest that aren't at all documented, and this is a really good thing for people to kind of get integrated into their workflow if they're doing ZFS development. So basically what we want is we take the two software versions, which now they don't have to be kernels. They're this libzpool library that already exists that has all the kernel code compiled into it. We have the new code, which has some old disk has the new disk format of like 25 random number, and the old code that has the old version 20. And we're testing that the new format is compatible with the old format. So we create the pool using ztest, the old ztest, so it has version 20. We open it with a new ztest, run all the ztest test suite that just scribbles all over it, close it, and open it again with the old one that's run the same test suite, and nothing should explode. And you continue alternating between 2 and 3 for forever. All right, so a little more detail on how that works in ztest, because this has some, if you're adding tests to ztest, it kind of changes how you add tests a little bit. So the way it always worked is there was a ztest, the main kind of parent process that starts. It forks a child that runs one test run, sort of, and then the parent has the option of letting the child finish or sending it sig kill to simulate a system crash. And so what I did was I changed it so that the child still gets forked, but the child randomly chooses to exec either the old ztest or the new ztest with some special options that tell it you're doing a single test run, like you are the child. And it also, what it initially does is, you always run the newest one, but you specify with the -b command line argument, this is where the old one lives. It'll exec the old one to create the pool, and then, like I said, randomly select who should scribble to it. And the way ztest works generally is you just leave it running for as long as you feel comfortable, until you feel comfortable that everything's working. So you just keep doing that, and it keeps spawning children that keep running the tests back and forth. All right. Oh. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
With the -b option, is it a single old version that you specify?
Yes.
Okay. So you would, if you wanted to test many old versions, you'd wrap this with some.
You'd wrap this with I'm going to get to that at the end, kind of like why this is sort of extra important for everyone to know about in terms of like and your testing infrastructure at your organization. So let's see. Oh, so it's sort of important if you're adding tests. It used to be obvious this is just forked, like all the address space was still there. Now, since it doesn't exec, it wipes out everything. So tests need to pass information to each other to kind of say like, this is what I've written, so you can confirm that. And when you if the old one was killed by a sig kill, the next one that starts kind of gets to confirm that everything is still in consistent state based on what he knows should be there from this information. So this is now just written to a temporary file, which is mapped into each child's address space as they're started. And the big thing is that if you write future tests in ztest, they're going to need to be aware that they may be launching some older version. And so they need to check the versions on the pool to say like, this test should be run because this test shouldn't be run because the pool version is before whatever feature I'm testing was in there. And this probably would be pretty easy with a feature flags thing, where basically what you say is this feature enabled, and then you test the feature. And here's just an example of the output. This is the same as the previous one, but there's these bold lines are a little extra, so it just tells you which binary is being executed to run the test. And then at the end says like, I ran the old test this many times and the new test this many times. This is a little detailed and gory, but this is what actually needs to go in the -b option, since there's 3 binaries, ztest, zdb, and the libzpool library that all need to be saved, and each one has a 32-bit and a 64-bit option. So you mimic the directories you would have had and pass that in, and then there's a little blurb at the bottom of you can run this command on your current system to pull out the right things and stick them in a directory. But we'll post this online later and people can take a look at that. All right. So for developers, kind of what I envisioned and what I did was I just took our latest release, well, not actually a release at that point, but the thing before what I was screwing around with, got this in there, grabbed the ztest stuff from there, and then just had that always sitting on my machine. So when I was making changes, and I wanted to test them, I would just run that against the things I knew were before I did anything wrong. Once this has been in there this has been in the operating system for a while, I envision people like taking from the latest release and running against that, since that's you've put that release out there, so that's the stable version. And then something I think is important, we haven't done it at Delphix yet, but I'm planning to do something like this, is you keep a repository of all the old ztest and libzpools from all your releases, and you do what Matt was saying, where you run the current version against all the old versions. So that's it for this, if anyone has any questions.
So is there any value in using this place of zpool create -o version equals whatever to actually do the creation for the upgrade test itself?
For the upgrade test. So there's a problem with the version equals whatever implicit in that you're using the new software.
Right.
I don't know what you're really testing when you do version equals whatever and then run it with the current one.
Agreed. But you're talking about using this to run the tests themselves, both the old version of the software and the new version of the software. I'm talking about running the zpool upgrade test itself.
Testing zpool upgrade itself.
Correct.
You can, that would make sense still to do with the version equals whatever.
Okay, so
And
there's
then-
no
would run
difference
that
there.
code.
And that's actually done by the ZFS test suite. So the test
Okay.
suite, one of the things that's different between ztest and the test suite is test suite uses the standard like CLI interfaces. So it does
Sure.
like zpool at ZFS, where this is really just talking about how it interfaces to the kernel. So most of the things that you look at in ztest are going to be all kernel calls directly.
Okay.
For example, it would call spot create instead of calling zpool create pool, whatever.
Sure.
So it's kind of more of a stress test component, but because of the things that Chris has added, it gives you the flexibility of kind of testing kernel interfaces and how they've changed across versions.
Right, okay.
No, I'm not sure.
Got it.
Had it open a second ago.
Is it this one? No, it's, no.
Yeah.
Feature flag, this one.
So one of the things I would love to see before you put this is somewhere, this is a call for a volunteer or volunteers who are interested in putting together a public system, or somewhere out in maybe, I don't know, Joanne's infrastructure, some systems that can run nightly builds and nightly regression tests, sort of like what we had for PIT. But actually, in this case, I guess it would be not PIT, it would be post-PIT. Or the P is post-integration testing. I think the community would really benefit from some centralized, regular test runs of test suites and so forth.
I agree with that. I think that's pretty important. First, we need the tests that we execute, then we need somewhere to run them. So let's get those tests first.
Oh, yeah, well, we have some tests today, right? And I think once having I don't know, test cabal or whatever, come together to figure out how to put this together, I'd love to see that happen.
Well, I think we'll be similar if we've done on the list, and we start gathering on people who are interested in that kind of stuff. And doing that stuff.
That'd be awesome.